Hi everyone, Crista here with another episode of the Barefoot Genealogist. Today's topic is place research. Now, some of you may be very familiar with how to do people research, but place research has a place in family history research as well. There's two main reasons why I like to incorporate place research when I'm researching my family history. The first one is that the more we understand about the place where our ancestors come from, the more that we know where to find the records that we're looking for. If, for example, we know that the county courthouse was burned in 1903, we know that it's very possible that records before that time might not be available as far as the local records for that county. If we know that that there was a battle fought in the Civil War in that area, or if we understand that there was a flu epidemic that went through that city, if we understand lots of different things, like those are the kinds of things that as we start to understand, we start to know where the records can be found. It also affects boundary changes, both at a local level, at a county level, sometimes even at a state level. And then as we start moving into records overseas, as we look at Europe and things, we discover that even sometimes entire country boundaries change and affect who's going to have the records for the time period that you're looking for them. So that's the first reason why place research is important. The second reason for me why place research is so important is because it helps me understand my ancestors a little bit better. When I start to understand about the circumstances that they lived in, the climate, like weather and how that, think about how often we discuss the weather. It always amuses me to hop on Facebook and to see everybody complaining about how hot it is. And just a few months ago, everybody was complaining about how cold it is. And that affects people. That's something that affects people's daily life. And so we can understand things about the weather. We can understand things about growing seasons as we look at almanacs and what was going on that way. We can understand things when it comes to politics and war and even local issues like local government and establishment of cities and how those cities grew up, and if our ancestors were involved in founding churches or any of that kind of thing. Even if your ancestor's name isn't mentioned as you start doing some of this research, you're going to discover that you get a better feel for what it was that they lived through. And for me, I don't just do genealogy so that I can make sure I fill in the blanks on the pedigree chart so I know when they were born and when they were married and when they died. I do genealogy also to come to know these ancestors and to honor them by making sure that their stories are told in the best and most truthful way that I can tell them. And so place research helps me to do that. So today, in the short time we have together, I'm going to share with you a few resources on Ancestry.com where you can find information that you need to do place research, and then I'll share with you a few of my other online resources that are not on Ancestry.com. Hopefully you'll get enough information or at least enough inspiration to go and dig into it yourself. So let's dive in. Okay, so first of all, you're going to want to become familiar with place pages on Ancestry.com. You're going to find them on the search page, the main search page, not the home page, but the main search page. If you scroll down past that search box, you're going to find that map. And then there's going to be history and resources available for locations. Let me show you how to do that. We're going to hop over here to an internet browser. I'm going to just click on search, or I can click this top link. They both take me to the same place. You'll notice I'm here on the search page. I'm going to scroll down to that map, and now I can click on any one of these locations. So for example, I could click on West Virginia here, and it's going to take me to a place page that lists all the databases that we have for that location. But you'll notice here that it's on the Collections tab. There's also a History tab and a Resources tab. So become familiar with this location. For example, West Virginia, one of the reasons that you might want to know about it is it didn't become a state until 1863. So records prior to 1863 might not be held by archives and repositories in West Virginia. They may be held by an archive in Virginia. And so you can start to read through some of the history and understand that just at a really basic high level. Then there's this resources tab, And on this page, we have tried to give you links to places, like official places where you can find records or information about the state. On almost every one of these state pages, what you're going to find is a link to the State Vital Records Office. You're going to find a link, hopefully, to the state archives, which includes some history information. And you're going to have other links to genealogical societies and organizations that have some affiliation with that location. That can take you traveling off into the internet. This is where I think that idea of surfing the internet got its name from, because you just kind of follow the links and see where they go. You start to see things about, like on this page, for example, there are links here about the history of the place that you can click on. There, it looks like they have maybe a book that they've published about the history of the state. Maybe you put that on your wish list for a gift if your family needs ideas for what to give you. So those place pages, again, you're going to find them under the search tab. Scroll down to the map and then click on any one of those locations. If you have a U.S. subscription and you're accessing this from the U.S. From the .com website, then it's going to default to a U.S. map. You do have access to UK and Ireland maps, to a map of Europe, a map of Canada, and a map of Australia and New Zealand as well. And if you are accessing the website from our co.uk site or our .ca site, it'll land you on the appropriate tab based on the country that you're coming from. So that is the place pages. Next, the next resource on Ancestry.com to help you do some place research is our wiki. Now, I know some of you are familiar with the wiki and have spent some time with it, but I get asked when we do tweet chats and when I go through the emails that I get every day, I get asked repeatedly, how do I find this record from this time, for this place? And I don't have that information magically in my head for the most part. I actually just go to the wiki and look it up. So here's how you're going to find the wiki. It's in the Learning Center, so you just hover over the Learning Center, and then it's the very bottom option there, Family History Wiki. Now you can, again, just browse, just click on links and surf your way through stuff. The red book you can see is a list of state, county, and town resources in the U.S., and then the source is this guidebook to American genealogy, and it's done mostly by record type. There's also a search box over here. So for example, I could come in here and I could type in North Carolina, and then I have links here. I can learn about colonial North Carolina, if that's when my ancestors lived there. I can learn just generally about North Carolina family history research, and that's the link I generally start with. And then there's these really great articles written by expert genealogists about the history of the place. And I can read a little bit about it so that I understand what's going on, how that place was created. And then there are links over here on the right-hand side where I can just walk through different kinds of records. So vital records, for example. The births and deaths were not required by the state until a law was passed in 1930, and full compliance wasn't achieved until about 1920. So if you're looking for a birth certificate before then, there's some information here about where those records were kept, if they were kept. Marriages, it looks like, were recorded all the way back in a 1669 law. I love that. Required that marriages be registered. Compliance was low. So those are the kinds of things you're going to learn in these articles, is what records even exist, when the state passed certain laws, where you're going to find those records, and you can just click your way through each of these links for different kinds of records. So again, that's the Family History Wiki, and you're going to find that under the Learning Center. It's the very bottom option there, Family History Wiki. When you get there, just type a place into this search box and click go, and then see what comes up. Okay, so that's the second resource on Ancestry.com for doing place research. Now the third resource may seem a little not intuitive for some of you. When you're doing place research, or when I'm doing place research, one of the things I want to see is what records Ancestry.com has online for that place. And so I'll use the card catalog. I'll go into the card catalog, which you're going to find is the bottom option under search. So I'm going to click down here on the card catalog, And then over here on the left-hand side, if I scroll down just a little bit, I have place filters or location filters. So I'm going to click on the U.S., and then maybe what I'm interested in is Tennessee. So I'm going to scroll down to Tennessee, and I'm going to click on that. And what that's going to show me is that Ancestry.com has 8,365 databases that contain records that pertain somehow to the state of Tennessee. Now you'll notice looking at this list, because it's sorted by popularity, the top several of these are federal censuses. Well, of course, because Tennessee was included in the federal census. If you want to get a little bit more specific, you can use these record type filters. Now, one of the most underused but greatest treasures we have on our website are these stories, memories, and histories. So when I click on that, I'm going to get another option here in these filters for social and place histories. And what these are, for the most part, are books that have been scanned and digitized that are local histories. Books that were written, some of them, a lot of them were written in the early 1900s, lots of them were written in the late 1800s, and they're about the founding or the establishment of that place. So I can look here and I can see, for example, let's just see if I can pick out a good one here. Early settlers of Alabama, even though I was looking at Tennessee, it's got some connection, I'm sure. And so I can come in here and I can read this database description about what this book is about. Here's why. It has to do with the Tennessee Valley. There's some information in this book about that. And so I can search this particular book for information about my family that may have been in that place and get an idea of what this book is about. There are other books, and let's see here. I think if I go to Shelby County, I think we'll get a... So here we go, the history of Memphis, so the city of Memphis, where you'll actually be able to browse the book. And you'll see over here on the right-hand side, so I'm not going to be searching for anything. I can just come over here and I can go straight to that first page of that book. And then I can just go page by page through this book as if I was reading it, just using these arrows here. I can get the title information. Looks like this book was published in 1873. I can read the preface. If I want to, I can skip all the way to the end of the book and see if there's an index included. I can look at the chapter headings and see if any of those are of interest to me. Like here's one that looks interesting just at a glance, sickness in Memphis. Apparently there was an illness in 1827 that killed all the cattle, right? And then there was a breakout of breakbone fever, and that caused some problems with the people. So, those are the kinds of things that you're looking for, is even if your ancestors not mentioned in this book, if they were living in this place at this time, I would want to know about this. Maybe they had a couple of children that died, and now I might have an idea about why those children died. Maybe they moved. I have ancestors that just picked up and moved one year after living for a couple of generations in one place, and the whole family picked up and moved. Parents, grandparents, cousins, in-laws, like the entire family just picked up and moved. Well, doing some research, I discovered that there was an earthquake, and apparently it freaked them out so bad that they were not going to stay in that place. So place histories will help give you that kind of context for what's going on. Again, that's if you go into the card catalog, you're going to find those under stories, memories, and histories, and then you're looking for this social and place histories, and then you can filter it by location or time period to get an idea of what's available. But we have thousands of books that have been digitized that include information about some of these locations. So that is the third resource available on Ancestry.com for doing place research. So we've got place pages, the Ancestry Wiki, and then the card catalog. Now, let me just share with you quickly in our last few minutes here my favorite resources that are not on Ancestry.com. And then if we have time, I'll share with you a bonus research. So I am a big fan of maps. I always have been. Since I was a child, I used to love getting out the atlas and figuring things out and looking where things are in relationship to each other. And even now, I love to drive, and I travel a lot, and even though I have GPS that gives me turn-by-turn directions, I will get out a map, or I'll pull up a map on my phone and zoom in and out so that I can have some context for the geography of the place. Were there hills? Was it flat? Was there a river? What was the terrain like? So that I can have this image of what it was in my head. Again, it helps us understand things a little bit better. Also, maps are important because of boundary changes, and we discussed that a little bit earlier, but to know when and where the boundaries changed helps you understand where you need to be looking, or where you could be looking for records. So, the first place that I generally go is to see if there's any land ownership maps. I'll go to Google and type in the name of the town and just see what comes up on Google Maps, just to get an idea of what it looks like now. But if you want an idea of what it looked like then a little bit, these land ownership maps are amazing. So you're going to find these. Let me reset my filters here. The easiest way to find them is just to come in here into the card catalog and just type in land ownership, and it's the very first link that comes up, these U.S. county land ownership maps. And I can come here and I can say, okay, I can search. So these are indexed based on who lived there and how we could read the maps. But if you spent time with the 1940 census before the index was available for your location, you know that there are some real treasures to be found just by browsing through a collection of records. We search and we go straight to the record we're looking for, and then we move on, and we miss this rich context for what's going on around that record. And so I would encourage you to actually use this browse feature over here and to browse some of these records, because it gives you a really great experience, again, in learning about the place. So I'm going to come here to this Washington County, Arkansas land ownership map from 1906. And what you're going to discover here is, as you go page by page, there's a little bit of information. There are some images of buildings that were prominent in the community at the time. Then there is this map of the whole county. And I can zoom in and out. I can, play with it and see if, get a broad context, get a zoomed in context. This is kind of the key map that just tells me where I'm going to find the other information. And then as I go again, you're going to discover here, this is the township map. And so one of the things that it helps to understand is that a lot of counties in the United States are broken up into townships. So for example, my family lived in Fayetteville, which is a city in Arkansas. But Fayetteville, you can see here, is within the boundaries of the Prairie Township. And so that's why sometimes on census records, when you're looking, you think, oh, well, I thought they were living in Prairie. Well, I thought they were living in Fayetteville. Well, actually, it's both. And so when you look at a map and you start to understand how the local community breaks up their boundaries, whether it's by towns or cities or townships, and then what the other jurisdictions, the other geographical jurisdictions are, then you start to understand a little bit better what the records are that you're finding and what they mean. And then again, if you just keep going page by page through these, you'll discover that these maps then, actually, let me zoom in a little bit more so you can maybe see this. You'll see they start to list who actually owns the property. Again, these are land ownership maps. And so I can see who owns the property and the size of that property compared to their neighbors. This is really useful because it helps you understand, if I was related to this Gibson family, and one of the Gibson daughters married one of the Webb boys, now I understand, well, really, they just lived right there. Okay? Excuse me. It gives us context for their life. It also helps us, again, understand a little bit more about them and know where to go to get records. If my ancestor's name's on a land ownership map, now I know I want to be looking for tax records. I'm going to want to look for probably a will, because if they own land, there's probably going to need to be a distribution of that property upon their death. Or I might be looking for a deed or a transfer of ownership. And who are they selling their land to or deeding their land to? Is it a child or a grandchild? Those are the kinds of things, a son-in-law, those are the kinds of things that I am going to be looking for, but that by looking at it from a place perspective, I'll know that those things exist. So that's the county land ownership maps. Now there is one other thing I just want to point out here. Some of these are more than just maps, and you wouldn't know that if you didn't do this page-by-page search necessarily. So here's one for Union and Henderson County, Kentucky. And again, I'm going to scroll through page by page to get an idea of what it is that I'm looking at. This particular book has a table of contents, so I could just jump directly to the page that I was interested in, or I could just keep scrolling through this page by page. One of the things that I think is really interesting about this particular book is it tells me how far apart the different towns in the county are. Again, giving you an idea of the distances traveled. And we're looking at a map from 1880, and so the travel was likely by horse or by carriage. And so, you could go Google how long it took to get somewhere, and then you could go look at a Google map and see, is it hilly terrain? Did they have to go through a mountain pass to get from one town to the other? Context is everything. So again, I could just keep going through this page by page, but this book, one of the reasons I love this particular book and several like it, is that smack dab in the middle of the book here, it actually has a history of these counties. And this history includes things like, for example, information about the specific towns, information about churches in the area and who founded them and who served in them. And so there are names of people listed here. And sometimes they're just listed with initials. And so a search for your ancestor might not turn that up in a search. But it would if you came here and looked. You might discover that they belong to a particular church, and so you'd know you could go look at church records. Some of these books also have, I should have probably marked a page number, they also have biographies of prominent people in those communities that map is for. So that's, again, why a page-by-page search of these turns up this whole new rich set of information when it comes to doing place history. Now, the other map that I use a lot is a website called genealogyinc.com. And the specific link is genealogyinc.com/maps. And why this is so fabulous, and you'll if you haven't seen this before, I hope you'll be as excited as I am. I can come down here and I can click on any state. So for example, let's go to North Carolina. And what it does is it starts me out with North Carolina in 1664, and it says here are the boundaries, right? So in 1664, basically North Carolina was everything from here west, but there were really only two counties, and you can see there's no line drawn, so it wasn't really necessarily a strict geographical region. So if your ancestor lived somewhere in the middle, it might not be real clear. And then what happens is, as we start going next, and you'll see this year here is changing, but what you'll also start to see is the map starts to change. You'll start to see lines being drawn and names of counties changing and county boundaries being changed. And some of them are dotted lines, and it tries to give you a little description here. And so as you work your way through, you start to see how places became the places they became. You also start to see that it's very possible that your ancestor could have lived in one place their entire life, and yet in records it lists 3 or 4 different counties, maybe even a second state, as different states and locations get broken off from the original creation. And so here, just working my way through this, now you see, this over here is part of North Carolina in 1776, but it is today what we know as Tennessee. And so it's going to be a little while before that gets broken off into the state of Tennessee. There's going to be, now all of a sudden, we're getting into the late 1700s, lots of lines being drawn, but you'll notice still changes as new states are created, new counties are created, boundaries are shifted. You can also use these numbers down here and say, you know what, my ancestor lived there in 1836. What did it look like then? And that is a great, great, great resource. So again, that's genealogyinc.com/maps. That's the original URL to get you there. Then you can just click on your location and just view your way through that. It gives you context for understanding what the place was like when your ancestor lived there. Okay, we don't have much time left, so let me just breeze through these last two tips for you. I use Google a lot when I am doing place research. When I find a new place pop up in my genealogy research and I want to learn more about it, I will very frequently go straight to Google and say, you know what, tell me more about, this state or this location, and I'll learn a little bit more about it and look at a map and maybe read a Wikipedia article that has some history, maybe see if the state has a historical society or, something along those lines. And you'll see I visited the Tennessee Historical Society. So I use that, but even better than that, I use these other little links over here on the side. One of my favorite is books. So Google had, I don't know if they're still doing it, a very aggressive book digitization project with several major universities and libraries. And what they did is they went out and digitized all of these books that were out of copyright, and they've put them online. So for example here, this third link right here, you can see it says free Google ebook, and I can read it. Some of them are just previews, so you can see that the book exists. But some of them, the history of Tennessee, the making of a state, I can read this. And so I can just click through, and now I have this book at my fingertips where I can just read through the history of the state of Tennessee. Or again, I can jump to the index and see if, the index and see if any of my family names are mentioned. But maybe also check out that table of contents and see if there are things that happened in the state when my ancestors were living there that maybe I want to learn a little bit something else about. Another link when I'm doing a Google search over here is this news link. So I use books and I use news. And when I get to news, if you scroll over here a little bit, there's a little link for archives. So you'll notice that these are news stories published 4 hours ago, 3 hours ago, yesterday, right? But I'm interested in the news archives. Now you notice these dates, 1956, 1952, right? Now these are articles that were published a while ago. And so I can just scroll through and see, here's one from 1897. Google has gone and partnered with organizations that have digitized newspapers, and they've put them online. So Ancestry.com has lots of books, local histories, and newspapers online. You can check those out, or use Google and see if there are other books and newspapers that they have digitized that can also give you a feeling and a flavor for that time and place. Okay, just this last tip, and it's not really a place to go visit, it's mostly just a tip. Remember when you're doing place research to make sure you hit all jurisdictions or all levels of that geographical location. Sometimes it helps to understand a little bit about the history of a country, even the United States, even if you've lived here your whole life and went through schooling here, and understanding a little bit about the history of our country might help you understand a little bit more about the lives your ancestors led. So become familiar or more familiar with that. Learn about the history of the state, what was going on in the state, those boundaries when they were formed, then work your way down to the county level, the township level, possibly the town or the city level as well. It will really enrich not just your family history stories as you come to know and understand a little bit more about what your ancestors were doing and the circumstances that were occurring in and around their lives, but it will also help you know where to go to find more records about them so that you can further your family history research. I hope this has been helpful. Place research is something that clearly I could talk about for a really long time. If you have any questions about this, please email me at ask@ancestry.com. I do read those emails, and then I don't reply. Those aren't a reply email, but I use those questions that you ask and those research challenges and questions that you have to craft our calendar so that we can put out these presentations and help more people, because chances are if you've got a question, you are not the only person who's asking that question. So you can check our Facebook page and click on the events tab to see topics and dates. While you're visiting our Facebook page, let me just let you know about a new thing we have going on our Facebook page right now. There is an app there for this new Hall of Heroes, and if you just click on that, it'll take you to this page where you can leave a tribute, a permanent tribute to some of your ancestors or some of the heroes from the past. And then we're doing some prizes and some drawings for that. So be sure to visit our Facebook page to check out our new Hall of Heroes application, and also to click on that events tab to get a list of topics and dates for our future live stream presentations. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.